Welcome to today's episode of the Business Spotlight, powered by Payrock, where we shine a light on the incredible people that make our community thrive. Payrock is a payment solutions provider. We work with any size business or nonprofit, improving payment acceptance efficiencies while reducing overall costs. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the proposed Spec Tax. Joining us in the studio today is Tasma Powers and Joanne True, two very strong advocates for the Spec Tax. That said, we'll try to discuss both sides of this issue and discover why this is potentially beneficial for our community. So, ladies, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So can we start with the background? Where are we at today in terms of sales tax and Casper, and how has it evolved over time?
Sure. So currently, Natrona County has a 5th cent. Statewide, there's a permanent 4th cent. But Natrona County has an optional 5th cent that it votes on every 4 years. It was voted on in 22, and it will be voted on again in 2026. It funds general projects and administrative costs, and it is applied over all of the municipalities within the county.
Okay. So how's the 5th cent, because that's what we're currently working on right now, 5% sales tax, how has that been utilized to date?
Tasma, do you have anything to add to this?
I do, of course. So initially in 1974, when the 5th cent was first voted on and passed by Natrona County, it was used to create City Hall and obviously the Event Center, as it was called then, and Hall of Justice. And it was used for major construction, major capital projects. And the city of Casper, since that time, has used the funds for similar type projects, infrastructure, capital projects, and they do a survey to determine what the citizenry thinks would be the best use, and they try and gauge their use of the 5th cent funds off of the results of that survey.
Okay. And how does that compare? How does the 5 cent or 5% sales tax compare to other state or other cities in Wyoming? Are we the only one with 5%?
That's a great question. I believe the majority, except two
counties, do not have a 5th cent, at least a 5th cent.
Okay, so they still have the 4%.
Yep. So the other 21 counties in the state do have a 5th cent.
So in the past, you said that this comes up on the ballot every 4 years. Is that what you said? So in the past, how has this been received that we've tried to increase, or city council has tried to increase that percentage point?
Historically, the voters in the county approve the 5th cent at about 65 to 70%. It varies between those two, and so it's overwhelmingly approved, or has been in the past, on the 5th cent.
Okay, all right. So are you expecting some resistance for this new measure?
Well, maybe we should talk a little bit differently about how the 5th cent and the 6th cent, sort of structurally how they look, and why this is actually different, because in addition to this being a 6th cent, this is a Casper only. This is a municipal only sales tax. This is not a county-wide, whereas the 5th cent is Natrona County-wide. So maybe if we want to delve into that a little bit, that might be helpful.
Go for it.
So recently, legislation was passed that allow a municipality to put on a ballot measure sales tax provisions. So this is the first time that this tool has been used, this statute has been used. And we should mention, although we're not here to talk about it specifically, Mills has also got a 6 cent municipal-only sales tax on its ballot. But we're here to talk about Casper's 6 cent.
Right.
So the big distinction is how this is going to be utilized. So the 5th cent is a general funding mechanism. The 6th cent that's being proposed this time, and we call it the Spec Tax because it's for special use. So the projects, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up this ballot language. 8 ballots that will appear on the ballot. Each and every project will be voted on. So this is different from a 5th cent, which is you vote yay or nay on a 5th cent. On this Spec Tax, which will be a 6 cent sales tax within Casper only, each and every project will be voted on. So a voter will go in and vote yay or nay on each individual project, and there are 8.
Okay.
And the ballot language, as you can see, it talks about what the proposition is, what it will fund, and it talks about specifically what it will be, what the funding mechanism will be used for. The thing to keep in mind on this is that because it's a specific use tax, these funds can only be used for the projects that are voted upon successfully. So these funds can't be put into the general fund. They can't be used for anything other than this specific project. So I think those are the two main issues we want to get across on how this is different from the 5th cent and what voters are typically used to voting on.
Okay, so we vote specifically for each one, whether we're in favor of, for or against that particular
Correct.
Focus point.
Yep.
And we were pretty clear, and I think that the city council heard us, that we wanted to have that accountability with the voters. We didn't want to just have on the ballot a 6 cent. We wanted to have a spec tax on the ballot where we said we will pay tax if it's going to be used for this project, and the ability to say yay or nay on the projects that they came up with. And I think that does empower us as the citizenry to say we're willing to pay tax for this short period of time for this project, and have that transparency and accountability.
Right. So we can choose. Are there certain projects that are that have stronger capital needs than other projects? Are there, out of those lists, is it a pre-vetted list? All of them need a substantial amount of capital, or are there certain ones we can focus on?
Well, there's some that are going to have a lot less money attributed to them, like the Washington Park Band Shell is for $1.5 million, which the revenue estimates that'll take about 1 month of the spec tax to be in place to fund, as opposed to the Metro proposition, which that is, an entire build of a new Metro animal shelter, and that's 7.3. So that'll take a little bit longer.
So if this is a pre-vetted list, how do we get to this list?
So the city council determined what projects. So that's a better question for the city council directly. But they went out and looked at needs of the city, and they used some of the survey materials that they have, and they worked with user groups and talked about what projects it would appear that voters within the city had determined were wanted and needed in the community. So they are the ones who voted on these projects. And we now are advocating for the passage of these projects. I should have mentioned this too when we were talking about the mechanics of how this tax works. By statute, it is a 2-year, so it's maximum 2-year project sales tax. So what the city did was they estimated what 2 years of an additional penny would contribute, and they calculated that $35 million is how much would be available for this. And so they chose these 8 projects within that $35 million. So these projects are all standalone. They can all be passed. They're not competing against each other. The total of all of these projects is totaled at $35 million. So whichever projects are passed, the maximum time for this tax will be 2 years. It's not permanent. It will go away within 2 years. It'll go away at the end of those 2-year period, or when these projects that are voted upon successfully are funded.
Got it. Okay.
So
whichever is shorter.
Whichever is shorter.
Right.
So we just want to reiterate that it isn't a permanent tax, that it is a tax that will go away after whichever one of those things happens first. Okay,
so like a 3-year, 36,000-mile warranty on your car, whatever comes first.
Whichever comes first.
And we're definitely going to get into the pushback in a couple minutes. But what about alternatives? If this doesn't pass, how are these projects that seem very, very vital? I mean, there's the Metro, which is obviously important. There's the fire station. There's the Hogadon. There's a lot of main projects. If we don't pass this 6th cent, what happens? How are these projects funded?
Well, these projects are not likely to be funded without the 6 cent. And Casper, the city of Casper, cannot deficit spend. It can only spend what it receives in taxes or fees. It does receive a small amount of direct distribution from the state, but other than that, it can only operate within its revenue sources. It is likely that a couple of the projects, for example, the 911 equipment update and the fire station number 1 could be used with 5th cent dollars over a period of time. Obviously, 5th cent is fully deployed at this point in time to just keep our streets and basic safety equipment and other things going. But and we could always ask the city council, I don't see the feasibility of any of the other propositions being paid out of the general fund and the general budget of the city of Casper.
I think it's an important note that you just mentioned that the city council doesn't operate on a negative budget, contrary to the federal government. So if we don't get if this tax does not pass, if this spec tax doesn't pass, then these projects will most likely not be funded.
Or funded in any sort of critical period of time. There are, as Tasma mentioned, there are at least 2 projects on here. Probably 3, given the state of Metro, that will be funded. But that means other projects will not get funded then within the city, and they won't be funded in a timely manner. Do you want us to go through all of the...
Please do.
Okay.
Because I was going to ask you, are there critical ones? But it seems like more critical than others. But it seems like these are already pre-vetted from City Council, and these are the most urgent needs that we have right now in Casper.
Yes. As we stated, the City of Casper met with user groups. A lot of these are under the sort of umbrella of livability, other than 911 and the fire station, which clearly are those are definite needs. Those are needs for the community, and Metro as well. The rest of them, quite frankly, are about livability. I mean, I have a family in town. We use a lot of these. We were targeting, or we're trying to encourage projects that really do talk about sustainability and livability for the community. You know, when you talk about why people live here in Casper, it's because the mountain, the river, the parks, all of those amenities. And these, the 5 of them are really around those sort of livability standards.
Okay.
And they are additionally things that the city subsidizes now. So to improve those areas of recreation would improve the tax burden that we share for keeping those things around. For example, Hogadon, we obviously as taxpayers subsidize Hogadon, to keep it attractive and affordable for our citizenry and appeal to tourists. We need to have a good hill for people to ski on, and that project will allow it to remain open and decrease, with increased use, it decreases the subsidy that the city of Casper will have to pay. So ultimately, even with the livability component, it's not just, a social or charitable endeavor. It is truly to burden the government's subsidy of those projects.
Okay. Why don't you walk us through those projects?
Sure.
You put them back up? Yeah, sure. Can we see them?
So this is where...
I'll just hide behind it.
Temporarily.
So Proposition 1 is the Metro, and it is, as Tasma mentioned, $7.3 million, and it's to construct the aging, failing, and undersized Metro animal shelter. If you've been to the Metro in some time, it's kind of a... It is undersized. It is does not meet current specs, and certainly the city, when dealing with either lost animals or multiple animal situations where law enforcement needs to step in, there's just not adequate facilities to deal with that. Proposition 2, I'm going to have to kind of turn it a little bit, is $5 million, and it is for the second sheet of ice that currently exists. anyone who has spent any time as a sports parent, I have. There is currently one sheet of ice, so kids are playing very early in the morning, very late in the day, and we are not really able to host tournaments within town. So there is a livability standard there, but it's also about, what's keeping our youth and our young families in the community, and that's one of those. It will also bring economic development by allowing us to host hockey tournaments, which we're not really equipped to do right now because of the one sheet of ice. So for those hockey parents and those figure skaters and those skating sports, I think that'll be really critical. I should mention that Proposition 2 is a private-public partnership. There's a foundation that has raised a bulk of the money, and this is the city's percent of that project. So it is very heavily privately funded on that one.
And that private contribution is just to the city structure. It is not a privately owned sheet of ice. It is truly a contribution to our community from that group of donors.
Proposition 3, $4.2 million, and it is for the new quad chairlift to replace the aging, outdated lift and add lighting at Hogadon ski area. So the quad lift will also have a bicycle rack, so it will also provide some multi-seasonal opportunities for mountain bikers and et cetera. The quad lift that is up there is vintage, is the polite word I think we're going to use. And so it is, and they don't make them that way anymore. And it really is going to be a safety issue at some point. So $4.2 million on additional lighting and outdated lift. Proposition 4 is $4 million for the fast pitch fields for women's sports. So girls softball is a new sanctioned sport within the high school. Thank you. For a high school sport, and the girls currently are playing on undersized fields and non-sanctioned fields. And so it is a great way to be promoting, again, youth sports, but in particular girls sports. And having been a baseball parent, there is a lack of space for ball and stick sports, I think they call it. But so that is to build a sanctioned facility for women and girls fast pitch softball. Proposition 5, $4.4 million. It is for the replacement of Casper outdated Fire Station number 1. It is to partially fund it. It is for land acquisition and for design. It is not $4.4 million will not get us a new fire station, but it's in your neighborhood down here. You can see it, and it's clearly undersized, not in a great location, and it is needing to be replaced. So, but again, those costs will be for land acquisition and for design of a new building. Proposition 6, $5 million. It is for the outdated equipment for the 911 dispatch center. So it is not going to provide a new location or anything to do with the dispatch center, but it is for the outdated equipment. And I think, is a very public, the number one thing that people think about when they think about public services, roads and then EMS services. And so having, updated equipment is critical for the city. Proposition 7, $3.6 million is for a new auxiliary gym at the Casper Rec Center. Again, for those sports parents and those folks who are, in social clubs and that kind of thing, just public space is really limited right now. And so that will add additional space to the rec center. If you go in there at any time, I will guarantee that there will be an abundance of people using the Casper Rec Center, and it's just, it'll be a great facility addition to the facility for use. And then Proposition 8, $1.5 million is for the design, reconstruct, and preservation of the Washington Park bandshell, which, if you've been there, it is not ADA compliant. It is crumbling and falling apart, and it desperately needs some love. I know that there are, for anyone who went to the bear trap this year and saw it really does need some love. So $1.5 million. So, and again, all of these will be individually voted on. So when you as a voter go into the booth, you will have this on your ballot, and it will be a yay or nay on all of those. So it won't be an up or down on a spec tax. It'll be yay or nay on all of those. And again, as Tasma mentioned, that is so voters have say over what they think the community needs.
Right.
It is giving power to the voter to say, yes, I think we need a new metro, but, I don't necessarily care about one of these other projects. It gives the voter the ability to do that.
Right, gives them choice. Well, thank you for walking through that.
You bet.
I definitely notice one thing that strikes me is that all of these projects are very community focused and family focused. They're not things that we might not use all of those things. I definitely use 2 or 3 of them for sure. I mean, possibly more in the future. But they're not things that we just that are only good for. It's not a monument, or it's not something that, even the monuments can be important, but it's something that's family focused, it's community focused. And someone said recently that if we take the community out of Casper, we have nothing. It's not the mountain or the river. Those are great, but Casper is all about the community, and it's about families, and we're not Denver that has a million things to do on the weekend. We have our community, and these things will help, I think, incentivize those relationships and incentivize what we have that is so strong here in this community. Talk to me a little about the pushback, because there is people that would think, and it's very superficial thinking. Hogadon, why isn't it a private company? They're making money. It's ski lifts. It's a ski facility. Why do we have to finance that with our tax dollars?
So I think that the biggest issue for Hogadon is keeping it accessible for our youth and our citizenry, and it is nice if it increases the appeal to other skiers from other regions. But in the long, cold, dark winters that we have, to be able to have a place that is affordable and easy to get to and fun for our kids to, do something besides sit on their phones is really important for us. And we've had some challenges as a community with things for our children to do and their mental health and how they spend their time. And I think being outside is critical for those kids. And if it was private, we would see something similar to what happens in Colorado and our other regional ski areas that are fantastic resources, but incredibly expensive and difficult to justify. We want an affordable season pass. We want it easy for our kids and our families to be able to say, hey, I want to go skiing and go up there and have an enjoyable time outside.
Right. It's literally 15 minutes away. You can throw on your skis, and within minutes you're going down the hill. Whereas if you're living in Denver, you do have an hour, 2-hour drive or more, and the price point is obviously very, very different. What are the other concerns that you've heard? What are the vocal concerns that you've heard about the spec tax?
I mean, you get everything from taxation is theft. I shouldn't have to pay for anything. To specific arguments about each and every project, to why are the 5th cent funds not being used for these things. I don't know how to argue against the no taxes are fine. I mean, I did not drive here on roads I built myself.
Right.
When my neighbor, has an emergency, I want to know that I can call 911 and that EMS will show up. I want to be able to turn on my tap and not think about the fact that I am not paying market rate to get that water to me, like that basic argument. So I'm not sure how to argue against that particular one, so I'll just mention it, but sort of set it to the side. We get a lot of, why are you not using, the 5th cent was started to build things in the community. It was made for capital projects. That's why it was created. You now have almost 50 years. Well, you do have 50 years of this tax that built these things, and now you've got, for example, like the band shell and the Casper Rec Center. You've got 40 and 50-year-old projects that now need maintenance or additions to them or that kind of thing. And the reality is there just isn't the funding volume within the 5th cent to be doing these projects,
right?
Which is why we're looking for an additional funding mechanism to prioritize these projects to get them funded, because otherwise they either A, won't get funded, or B, they will be delayed and or not done to the level that we could with a simple 2-year 1 cent spec tax.
Right. Some argue that, sorry to interrupt you, but they argue that it's not going to be temporary, though. Because the 5th cent was theoretically, if I remember correctly, it was supposed to be temporary, and it's not. How do we know it won't be permanent?
Well, we vote on the 5th cent every 4 years, so it is not permanent. This is the same. It will go away. We'll have to put it back on the ballot. If I know that there's been some argument about like it will just go on and on and on. For this tax to be approved again, it will need to go on the ballot. There will need to be the same process that got us to these 8 projects. That same process will have to be followed. So there is no mechanism currently to just say, okay, we pass this, and instead of letting it expire at the end of 2 years or when these projects are funded, we're just going to go ahead and keep going. The city council does not have the ability to do that. The county commissioners do not have the ability to do that without, again, taking it back to the voters. So, I know that there's feelings around taxes and looking at the perceived versus reality, but both the 5th cent and 6th cent are not permanent. It does require voter approval to get those to self tax.
Every 2 years.
This one every 2 years. The 5th cent is every 4 years.
4 years. Okay, so they're not permanent. The 5th cent is already not a permanent tax.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
That's important to say,
Yep.
because that is something that I hear or I read quite a bit online, is that the 5th cent was supposed to be temporary, but it's voted on every 4 years.
It is voted on every 4 years in the general election.
What would you have to say about people that believe that this will negatively affect lower income households?
Well, I would say 10 years ago, the state government created exemptions on groceries and prescriptions.
Mm-hmm.
So the sales tax doesn't apply to groceries, prescriptions, fuel, and neither will this tax. On anything that is exempt from sales tax now will not be subject to the spec tax. So as you look at I would say that it probably impacts higher disposable income households more than it does lower disposable income households. If your household is buying groceries and minimally spending money in other areas, this is going to have a much less impact on you than someone who's buying a car or spending more.
Right. Okay, that's a very valid point. When we met for the first time at a Chamber of Commerce event, you said something very interesting. You said that when the federal government wants to increase our taxes, those are the taxes we should be very leery of. But when the city wants to increase taxes, those should be viewed differently. What did you mean by that?
Local taxes, well, the saying goes, all politics are local, right? But in this case, local taxes are the things that you see. They are the things that you see around you. They are the things that you touch that impact you directly. Nobody likes taxes, and usually when that topic comes up, it's more around federal taxes. Nobody likes paying taxes. I don't like paying taxes. But I also want the goods and services. And for me, looking at local taxation, I have a say as a voter. I get to vote on the things that I want to be taxed on, that I want in my community. And these are the things that, again, I see around me, I use, my neighbors use. And I think there's having that ability and that power as a voter over local control is critical.
Absolutely.
And sales tax, unlike property tax, income tax, and all of those, that is borne by visitors to our community as well. And that is the only tax that is borne. Lodging tax is borne by visitors, and a portion of the sales tax is borne by visitors. So as we look at how can Casper generate additional revenue, how can our community generate additional revenue through tax, this is the lowest burden to the citizenry that there is, because of we get to share it with those who stop into Casper.
Right. What about the pushback from saying that why doesn't the city council better allocate their funds? If they're not managing what they have already well, why are we going to give them more funds to work with?
Well, I think that's a great question for the city. We don't work for the city.
Right.
But when you look at and we do go to a lot of city council meetings, and, their budget is very transparent. They have won awards for their budget process, their transparency. I don't see a lot of waste. As a very critical person, I think, of course, there probably is some waste, things that they could have done better. They do a much better job at budgeting than I do personally, but I'm not accountable to anybody other than myself. I don't think that they're doing anything significantly wasteful. I think they have deferred a lot of maintenance in the past 50 years in our boom and bust cycles that we have. And fortunately, our economy has drifted in a positive direction where we are not so reliant on the oil and gas industry for our economy. We have healthcare, we have tourism as our number two economy in Casper, and we've been able to get healthier in that way. But we have a lot of deferred maintenance and things that we have not paid for. And that is catching up with us. It's caught up with us.
Right. That's a point that Kyle Gamroth brought up on the podcast a few weeks back about, and he's running for District 2. So if you're in District 2, check him out. That we have a lot of deferred maintenance in the city, and we're living with things that are 50 years old, like you said, at Washington Park and other places around town. So we cannot continue to drive on these roads, and we walk in our neighborhood every 2 or 3 times a week, and we notice that even the sidewalks, the roads, they need continual maintenance, and we can't rely on taxation 50 years ago. We have to rely on improvements that are today, because it's not. There are a lot of people in our neighborhood, they walk in the streets because the sidewalks are not level, and that should it's not safe. It's not a thing that I think that we should see. But we often, with my wife, we walk often on this street because it's a smoother ride. But that shouldn't be the case, and so we need to recognize that we're living off of maintenance that's several years old.
I have one more point on that.
Yep.
A local legislator often says this. Government provides things that you don't see. Taxes provides things that you don't even notice, right? So when you're driving down the road, unless there's a pothole, you don't really think about it, but when you're driving on a road, you don't really think about the fact that it just appeared out of nowhere, right? I take my dogs walking a ton in my neighborhood too. I have young kids. We go to the park. I don't really think about it, right? The park is just there. I turn on my tap, water just appears, right? So I think the thinking is that people think about I am paying for things that I don't use, but you can't help but use a public service in the community if you go around town. You just can't. And so I think the whole thing of we have to pay for the things we use, even if we don't really think of them as public goods or the fact that they cost money, right?
Absolutely.
It isn't until there's a pothole where you realize all of the maintenance that goes along in road construction, right? I just wanted to make that point as well. But you're right. I mean, because of the, you look at the rise and fall of the, oil and gas price, and when times were good, we fixed things. But boy, there was a lot of not great times throughout the 90s and early 2000s when there just wasn't the revenue to do all of those things, and so nothing was getting fixed. And now, the roosters come home to roost, and we've got to pay for those things. And so,
absolutely.
So
it's interesting. When I was getting ready for this podcast a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we were in Colorado Springs, and I was just looking at the fact they have a higher sales tax, which is the case for a lot of communities outside of Wyoming. I think they're at close to 9% local sales tax, because Colorado, same thing. You have a state sales tax, and then you have a local sales tax as well. But one thing I noticed is that it's the Colorado Springs is a nice town. It's green. There are parks everywhere. There are slides in very, very small parks. There's amenities for families in extremely small parks, and all of that is done and paid for by that local sales tax. And so it's definitely something that we need to realize, is that if we want these amenities, then that they're not going to come for free.
Yes. Livability is a big factor in economic development. And when you look at bringing companies and potential, employers to Casper and Natrona County, their employees want to live in a place that is highly livable. And that is something that, regardless of your feelings on these propositions, that is something that we have to improve and keep wonderful for Casper, is the livability, so that we can be a destination of choice for visitors and residents alike.
Absolutely.
I think you brought one of the comments you had in your notes was how does this prevent, or how does this impact travelers or tourists coming through.
Right.
And I was going to make the point that you just made. When you travel somewhere else, do you really pay attention to the sales tax, right? You go and think like, oh, they have lovely,
Right.
facilities and I can go do these things. I don't really pay attention to, it does not prevent me from going somewhere if the sales tax is higher than where I live. And so I think Tasma's point is correct. Like the whole, point behind taxation is don't tax me, don't tax tax the man behind the tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to push off as many taxes as you can on other folks. And in this case, it's people who are coming through our community and are enjoying the things that we have to offer, but are not bearing any of the cost. And so sales tax pushes a little bit of that burden off to folks who are coming through and who are gaining the benefit but are not having to pay for those things. So just wanted
Right.
to make those two things
Absolutely.
on folks coming through.
And overall, nothing is for free in society. There's always a cost. And in today's politics on a wider scale, we hear that often was, why can't we get this for free or that for free? Well, there's no such thing as free. Free college education, someone's paying for it.
Exactly.
Free healthcare, someone's paying for it. And if we don't try to stay responsible for our own lives and stay accountable for what we're doing, it's going to come back at us through increased wages, wage taxes, employment tax. Maybe we'll get a state tax, a state federal tax, or state tax for Wyoming for wages. It's going to come back. So if we don't manage our own household well, someone else is going to manage it for us, and that's what we don't want. And that's why I think there needs to be a resistance of this. Maybe resistance is a strong word, but of this concept of we can get things for free from the government, whether it's local government or state government, because nothing is for free. Nothing.
And that's along the lines of why we appreciate so much the way the Spec Tax is structured, where you get to vote on whether or not this project will go forward and thereby trigger that 6 cent. We're not voting on, yes, we give the city of Casper $35 million to spend on, we hope,
Right.
these 8 projects. We're saying, here you go. We approve the band shell. We approve Metro. We approve these 8 projects, and that is this amount of money is what you're going to spend on this project, and move forward in that way.
What's the reality that this pot of funds will be allocated quickly, and we stop charging the 6 cent?
Well, it has to end in the 2 years.
Okay.
And the city, I believe, is planning on beginning the projects that pass sooner rather than later. I mean, there's obviously a delay between the time that the tax is passed and the tax goes into effect, and then the funds are raised. But it will not last past the 2 years. As the funding comes in, the city communicates with the Department of Revenue, and then the Department of Revenue updates the tax schedule for the relative area of the taxpayers. And so it's relatively quick. Once the funds are raised, the tax will go away.
One other point, and again, we're not with the city, or speaking on behalf of the city, but at open houses and at some of their city council meetings, they indicated that they have selected shovel-ready projects. So these are ready to go, and so funds can be appropriated and projects can start relatively quickly, which I think is another benefit to a spec tax. It's not, we're going to raise some money and then in 10 years you're going to see this thing. It is that the intent is to start working on these projects as soon as they are approved. So, shovel ready was one of the qualifications for these projects.
Okay. In closing, because I think we could, keep going. There's a lot of other subjects we could discuss. But can you tell us where we can get more information? And I believe you're also, so if that's the website, can you see it? Yes, for spec.org. There's already a Facebook page I noticed the other day that some people are pushing very strongly, which is good. Where else will you be in the next few days? Because I think you'll be at some events. Because there was an event at the rec center, which I saw all this information there for the first first time? Where else will you be in the next coming days?
I would like to add the City of Casper has excellent materials on their website that explain the spec tax and the project. It says specific purpose tax. We shortened it for our purposes, but they are also an excellent resource. And a neat feature they have is if you have a question about the tax or the projects, you can enter a query and someone will get back to you. And so there is that direct accountability with the city. For our purposes, we are planning at being at as many community events as possible to answer questions. We have the City of Casper's information, so it is nonpartisan, so to speak, informational only. And so next week we will be at the Business Expo with the Chamber at the Ford Wyoming Center. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. We will be embracing that. And we will be at the Ski Swap next weekend, and also at the Davis Street Station Trick or Treat. If we are really trying to get the information out there so voters can be educated and make the decision for themselves on the projects and the potential for the spec tax.
Excellent.
One last thing, I would like to note that we are doing the marketing for the Yes for Spec, but some of these user groups also have their own efforts, and so you'll see some. I think you've probably seen some Metro signs, the adorable little kitties, Yes for Metro. The skiing folks have their Hogadon materials out. Girls softball are working on theirs, and of course I have seen now all over town the ones for the second sheet of ice. So there's some other user groups doing those efforts too. But as Tasma mentioned, we'd like to be at as many events as possible. So if there's a user group or questions, please reach out to us if you don't get the questions you need from the City of Casper information.
And will you respond to questions if they post them on the Facebook page, for example?
We try, but we do, on the informational stuff, we try to push those out to either the user groups or back to the city for information. But yes, we do have, we are monitoring social media and will reply to questions. Okay.
Well, I hope this podcast was answered questions that our audience has, and they can come back to it to get more information. Thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate the time. And thank you for being listening to this podcast again. If you haven't taken the time to like or subscribe, please do so. Share it with your friends and colleagues, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.